Hi, good afternoon. I'm Nicola Lathbury, the Managing Director of Hexagon FM, and I'm your Chair for Women in FM SIG and for the IWFM Midlands region. So welcome to the 7th webinar in the IWFM's Turbulent Time series. So far in the series, we've explored different aspects of the impact of the global COVID-19 pandemic and what impact it's having on the workplace and facilities management. So the pandemic has turned our traditional working setups and home lives on its head. How can we as individuals stay mindful and balanced in unpredictable times, especially when working from home? And with the responsibility for employee wellbeing covering all aspects of workplace in and out of the office, how can facilities professionals best help their organisations shape an effective wellbeing response? So in short, how can we stay mentally healthy to ourselves during these times, and how can we perform the role that as wellbeing enablers for our organisations? So we've called this episode Remote Yet Connected and Wellbeing in the Times of COVID-19. And as we start to get on with our lives in this new post-pandemic world, we're going to explore some of the wider questions around wellbeing. I'm joined by 4 guests today, each of them involved with wellbeing matters in some way in the workplace and facilities management sector and others not. And I want to explore some of the questions that arise as we navigate our way through the other side of the crisis and focus on another human challenge. So let me introduce my guests. They're going to give you a couple of minutes about who they are and what they do. So I'm going to hand over to Tom Flatto.
Hi there, Nikki. Thank you very much. Well, welcome everybody. And what we specialise in is helping people become really fulfilled at work and overcoming limiting beliefs at a really deep emotional level so they can be who they want to be, achieve what they want to achieve. And, you know, the end product is the organisations, their organisations prosper. And we do this through science, and in particular neuroscience, because that explains why certain behaviours work, why certain behaviours don't work. And in our experience, senior managers really get engaged and buy in far more if they know, if they're not just told you should coach your staff rather than tell them what to do. They might say, yeah, okay, fine. But if you explain why from a science and brain perspective, that really carries far more weight and you can really see their behavior change happening. And during this time, we've been coaching an awful lot of senior leadership teams who need support and whose traditional ways of behaving aren't cutting it during this practice. So we're really helping them draw on, rather than necessarily the red energy that helped get them where they are today, other traits like empathy and helpfulness that perhaps in the past they've demonized, and that's what we specialize in.
Awesome. Okay, CJ, over to you.
Thank you. Morning, everyone. So I'm co-founder of a business called Brave Goose, and we're a human resources technology business. So we deal with all the gnarly parts of HR, the stuff that gives you massive headaches, and we put a way to walk through that in the palm of your hand 24 hours a day. We're absolutely obsessed with empowering and enabling people, and that has a huge part to play in well-being. But you can only empower people if you give them the tools to be able to do great work. So that's the stuff that we're really excited and passionate about in a nutshell. Thanks, Nikki.
Good stuff. Hi, Nancy. Could you tell everybody about what you do?
Hi, Nikki. Yes, I'm Nancy Hay. I'm the Executive Director at the What Works Centre for Wellbeing, and we bring together the global knowledge base about what makes a difference to improve people's lives and what organisations can do about it, whether they're government, whether they're businesses or charities or just community groups and individuals themselves. So we can cover the whole base, and I'll try and bring the latest evidence from the best researchers across the world.
Awesome, fantastic. And finally, Joanna Schlash.
Hi, I'm Joanna. I'm the CEO at Moneypenny. We've got about 1,000 people over both in the UK and in the US, looking after telephone calls and live chats for about 18,000 different businesses, ranging from micro businesses through to international corporations. And for us, our whole focus over the past 20 years has all been about the fact that if we've got happy people, they will have happy clients, because our clients have to trust our people to do a brilliant job. And that means that we have to go and find the right people, recruit the right people. And my job really is to make sure that those people are happy, engaged, and clearly we're in a different environment. So that's always been a challenge.
Excellent, fantastic. Well, thanks everybody for joining us on the webinar today. Hopefully we get lots of audience interaction. So please, folks, please put your questions in the chat box so we can put them to our panel. You've got a wide variety of experts here today, so make full use of them whilst you can. So I'm going to kick off with our first question. And so to each of the panelists, how can we as individuals stay mindful and balance in unpredictable times, especially when we're working from home? And what are the best things that people can do for well-being? So Tom, could you help us with that one?
Yeah, well, starting at a very specific level, what I'm finding a lot of our clients complaining about all the time is Zoom fatigue, because what's interesting to note is when you're not face to face, when you don't have that, when your brain's not picking up on those body signals, those micro signals, it's having to do an awful lot of extra processing to read between the lines. So an hour's Zoom meeting is way more fatiguing than an hour's face-to-face meeting, and people don't realize this, wonder why they're so knackered at the end of the day. And so just by taking breaks, putting 10 minutes between each meeting is going to really help that. Very, very important. The other thing is that, you know, the brain is a social organ. All neuroscientists will tell you that. And one thing, even though that sort of in many ways home working has increased productivity in some organizations, what people are complaining about is the lack of relatedness. A lot of people come to work for that social contact which they're missing. So we need to engineer some of that as best we can in a remote way. And finally, I would say objectives. So they're incredibly important, because at times like this, if we're allowed to meander with our thoughts, ruminate, our brain is in what's called a default mode network, where we're very alert to threats, bad news, what could possibly go wrong, and that creates anxiety. Whereas if we have objectives, project-specific focus, it immediately switches the brain into the central executive network, where rewards rather than threats come much more to the forefront, and people generally feel better. So it's really for everybody to make sure that they have real focus at the beginning of each day. They know what they're working on, they know what projects and deliverables, and that's where very, very good management is important to help people set those clear objectives.
Excellent. Sincere apologies to everybody there. In the true spirit of working from home and being authentic, somebody has just started drilling outside our house, so I've had to quickly shut the window. So sincere apologies there. That could only actually happen to me. So Nancy, what lessons can we learn from this crisis in terms of personal resilience for mental well-being that could actually be harnessed for organisations?
I think this is absolutely fascinating. So we have learned so much about ourselves and our organisations as we've adapted to this change, often incredibly rapidly. So one of the things that I think we've all suddenly noticed is this attention to things that we may otherwise just miss normally. So we're suddenly bringing our whole selves to work in a whole other way. We're seeing cats, dogs, etc., people's bookshelves, everything behind us, and people will feel really differently about that. So there's a couple of things I wanted to probably notice. This is probably more akin to the experience of a long-term voyage than it is to normal typical isolation, so an Antarctic trip or some other, or it's time on an oil rig. So we can learn a lot from those, and also from teams that already exist. So how we manage remotely is a different beast, but actually the same principles apply. So Tom talked about goal setting and keeping those relationships. You can't see them. How do you make sure that you keep those regular connections and not keeping it all waiting until we get back to some sort of normal? That management is just as important now as it ever was. But there's also some of the physical things that matter that facilities management really really take a big part in. So the physical space in which we work in, how we sit, how we stand, how safe we are at work, both practically and how we feel about safety at work. I mean, this is the more conversation I've ever seen about PPE in my life, but also the basics. So are we taking enough exercise? Do we have a routine? Are we getting enough sleep? Do we have the boundaries between our households? Are we taking breaks? Are we standing up? Are we haven't got the coffee and tea break? How are we doing? And so the resource I've been advising on is the Public Health England NHS Every Mind Matters online resource, which is brilliant. It's got COVID resources. But for the national data, you can see that we got really anxious, really scared, and now we're starting to get frustrated and a bit bored and a bit apathetic, and you can see that in the national data set. And whilst our positive mood really hasn't recovered, so those things that we do with our colleagues that are fun and just happier are really important as well.
Excellent. I mean, this is one of the things CJ and I were talking about on the Whipham call the other day, where we was meeting up with the rest of the team on a Zoom call, and it was just so nice to see their face. But in normal times, when even if you've got a full day, you've got time in between each of these meetings where you go and travel to the next appointment, so you've got time to download everything that's in your brain, take a breather, refresh before you go in again. Anybody that knows me will say that I am really high energy and I'm usually bouncing off the walls, but I've got to be honest, even I've really struggled to feel quite fatigued throughout this particular time. And it's been it has been a struggle because all routine has all gone out of the window, to be honest, and that. So yeah, it's definitely been challenging. Tom, how unique is this situation in wellbeing terms, and has it been brought to the fore any particular wellbeing issues that were perhaps not so visible before?
Well, I think absolutely, Nikki, and I really like that example you just gave about your routines have gone out the window, and I think that's happened to a lot of people. It's a very familiar experience. One of the things we know about the brain, it likes certainty, because if we know what's going to happen, if that tiger's over there, will it run that way or that the other way, we can predict what's going to happen and stay safe. So that the brain craves certainty. And we simply, if we're disrupting our routines, that certainty has gone. So we're naturally in a more alert, heightened threat state, which is not good for health or well-being. And as you say, the other thing, running between meetings, walking between sites, commuting, we're not exercising either. And exercise is one of the key ways for neurogenesis, in other words, creating new neurons that right through adulthood the brain is capable of doing. And when we're not doing that, it immediately deflates our ability to be resilient. So really, really important to absolutely actively encourage exercise. A lot of our clients are in Dubai where it's 40 degrees. Some of them have bought exercise machines so they can exercise indoors because they can't do it outdoors. Even simple things like, you know, that the body and brain are actually one system. Not only do our thoughts impact our body, but our heart rate, our breathing and so on is interpreted by the brain to tell the brain, oh, he must be angry because the heart rate's high and the breathing's fast. So how we control our breathing is incredibly important. Even a few diaphragmatic breaths will trigger the vagus nerve, which is part of the parasympathetic nervous system, and that will instantly calm us down. So a few little tricks like that, very, very important to do.
I've been doing sorry.
I was just going to say it's also really brought to the fore, you know, how we manage, how line management is carried out. And it's really meant we have to rely much more on management through relatedness rather than management through status, which is some managers have taken to that. Others, again, it's a threat. Something's been taken away from them. So it's been an incredible time, really disrupting what we know.
Okay, so we've got a question here from the audience. Do the panel think that the COVID tracing app will have a negative effect on returning to some form of normal business within the opposed isolating? Who's brave enough to take this one? Anybody, any volunteers? Joanna?
I think that yes, it will have an impact, but for those businesses that have already set up work from home models, I think as leaders of businesses, we've just got to be prepared to be really, really flexible over the coming months or the next 12 months or however long it lasts. None of us have got a crystal ball, and I think what we have to do is to have a range of options in place, and we almost instinctively know which button to press at any one time. But clearly nobody knows what's going to happen. And I think the most important thing, and going back to Tom's point about mental health as well, is it's okay to say, I don't know, but let's just try this route.
Yeah, excellent.
Can I just pick on that one up as well? So we do know that people get used to things, they adapt actually relatively quickly. And then going back to normal can almost feel weirder than it did, because you kind of don't expect it to be weird, and it is. And also probably worth saying that change that we experience, those who are in leadership positions need to recognise that they will be slightly further ahead in terms of that change management every time people deal with it. And so those same emotions will happen every time.
Excellent, good stuff. So moving on from that, so it's often recommended that a formal wellbeing strategy will not only improve wellbeing but contribute to the business performance, which covers all aspects of workplace wellbeing, from flexible working hours to nutrition and fitness support. If you were writing such a plan, what sort of things would you include in it? Nancy, would you mind taking this one for us?
This is really important. So we know that most ad hoc wellbeing programs really do make a difference. You can tell that, whether it's a learning program or flexible working, you can see they help. Where we see the biggest impact on both performance and wellbeing is where there's a strategy and where it's integrated into the other things that you do. And so, for example, you'll sometimes see wellbeing stuff developed in health and safety bit, or in the HR bit of the organisation, or just individual managers teaching a mindfulness class or something. Works better is if it's integrated and you can see it. There's two reasons for that. One is that people feel more secure, and they feel that it's a serious thing that the organisation cares about, and you can see that in when people live. And I think it's describing Joanne's organisation, people live and breathe it. But also it means you can build on your strengths, and actually you've got a surprising number of things that you already do well that support well-being. You can see those and work out where the gaps are. So the sorts of things you want to be aware of. There's three types of things that you can do in terms of helping people who are sick get back to work quickly. You can help people who are struggling sort of maintain that work and and there's also things you can do to help promote things that support well-being. So knowing where you're helping people is important. The other thing is to think about sort of 5 different areas. So we looked at the drivers of well-being as to how they applied in the workplace, and you can see that health, both physical and mental and emotional, and relationships are the top 2 biggest drivers. But that's relationships. So you can see the sort of physical and mental health things. So being active, good nutrition, what you eat and drink, sleep, getting enough sleep actually is really important, and the sort of the mindfulness stuff that Tom was talking about. But then also relationships with colleagues. Is it a safe communication? But also how are people's relationships at home, and just understanding that people will have slightly different experiences of that, particularly on their age, but also could be depending on how old your workforce are, what those issues are might be different. But then the other areas become important. So we've talked about security, both and safety, about physical and emotional safety. Are you actually safe at work? And really acutely an illness one here, but also, do you feel protected at work, and is someone taking seriously your safety concerns? But also this idea of financial well-being, which is being, you can see lots more providers thinking about this. So it's better to reduce hours than to reduce jobs, but obviously that will affect different people depending on their different circumstances. So if you cut overtime, most people will be all right, but there'll be a couple of people who will actually really struggle. And are there ways of helping them better ways of helping with them with their financial situation. So the money pensions advice service has some good stuff there, but sort of better sources of finance are good sources, or a bike clone if somebody needs to change the way they do transport. And then the environment, so the air quality, the daylight and lighting, have they got out? You talked about walking between meetings and green space. How has that changed? And then the last is about purpose. And some of us, a job is just a job, and that's great. Where do people get that important stuff for their lives? It could be about skills that they're able to give. Are they able to help other parts of the organisation? Or maybe a younger, more tech savvy member of the team can teach us how to use some cool bits in Zoom or something like that. So we're all learning together. But also it could be about the values that you've got together. So we know that organisations that have strong values and a sense of belonging really are more resilient in difficult times. So are you proud to work where you are?
I mean, that leads me on to a couple of things that I know CJ does a lot of work with B Corps, and she's really, really passionate about this sense of purpose. And also Joanna and the guys at Moneypenny, they have a really, really super strong culture, which is one of the reasons we invited them onto the panel today. And so CJ, could you share with us a bit of the stuff that you guys do with the B Corps and that around this whole bringing a sense of purpose into work, and perhaps lead on to Joanna there to share some of the stuff that they do at Moneypenny?
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. So yeah, some of the kind of really great examples of the way people have kind of managed well-being really well throughout this kind of crisis have been those organizations that have truly understood that this is a deeply individual but kind of connected community experience that we've all gone through. And I think where people have given choice to their people about how they can turn up for work and how they can do their best work is some of the best examples of doing it the right way and leading the right way. I think, you know, one of the things that I felt really strongly about when we first went into lockdown is we were all bombarded with about 40 different instructions about how to safely work at home. And I had to have structure in my day, and I had to be showered and dressed by 8 o'clock. And it was all of these instructions about how to do stuff. And actually, some of the best organizations are the ones where they've really seen their individuals, what they're coping with, what they're going through day to day, and have been able to adapt and give them freedom to make their own choice. So I think where purpose is really clear from the organization, it makes a massive difference. But also where it is about, there are a number of different tools to support people's well-being, and giving people the choice in how they interact with them, it makes a huge, huge difference.
It's a massively individual thing, isn't it, that everybody's going through? No two people respond to things the same. Like Tom was saying about the flight and fight element, is that some people in our industry, they run towards the fire, they love the mobilisation, they love the hustle and bustle, and they're disruptive when they're in normal times. So these people are like thriving on what's going on at the moment. But the people that like to work in structure and steady state are probably finding it a little bit more challenging. And the organisations that do the best out of it will be the ones that allow that to be individualised, and one size doesn't fit all. We're definitely finding that from a recruitment perspective, is that the clients that are working with their employees and actually doing a more individual approach rather than a one size fits all blanket are the ones that are actually the places where the people are feeling most comfortable. They're trusting their employers to look after their physical well-being and safety, that they will only return them to work when it's right, as well as their mental well-being as well. And Joanna, that's one of the things that you guys really do well at Moneypenny, don't you? But I'd love you to tell us a little bit about how you've adapted your approach there.
Oh, well, like I said just a bit earlier, it's been a huge shift for us, you know, from being 1,000 people office based to 1,000 people working at home over a 3-week period was a real challenge. And I think it's also challenged our beliefs in terms of why we think culture is so important and what actually culture is to us. We're Sunday Times Best 100 Companies to Work For in the UK. We've been in the top 5 quite a few times. And a lot of that, we would have said in the past, revolves around giving people the right kind of working environment, you know, fresh air, daylight, lovely place to interact, a pub, for example. And as you've gone and put a workforce who's now based at home, it really starts to get you to think about what is it really that drives culture and engagement. Is it your actual office environment, or is it about the approach that you've got to your people? In that, however you're working, wherever people are, it's about making sure you look at somebody as an individual and not a number, and think what is the right thing for you. A lot of our initiatives that we would ordinarily do, for example, we've got pick and mix benefits, which is all about appropriate to your stage in life. Somebody who's 22 and just starting out wants a different range of benefits than somebody who's nearing retirement age, for example. So we have got a lot of flexibility in that anyway. But I think as we now start to think, actually, how does our workforce work in the future? Are we mostly office-based or home-based? How can we be more flexible to fit in with what people want? My approach to it would be to have a powwow. When we have periods of change in the business, or we've got a subject that actually needs to be explored, I would get people together, normally in the pub. That's going to have to be done differently. And I would say to them now, what is it that needs to change? How do we as business leaders need to change the working practices, benefits, or anything so that it fits into our new world?
Excellent, fantastic. So a decade ago, wellbeing was not really associated with running workplace and facilities, but most FMs will probably say that the work has always been around supporting healthy and productive employees. So as we start to transition in this new phase of this pandemic, what impact do you expect to see from changes to work occupancy, shift patterns, and in the medium to longer terms on workplace wellbeing programs? And Joanna, obviously you guys work across multi-continent, you've got multi-clients, and you're the first face of their organisation, aren't you? Could you pick this one up for us, you mind?
Yeah, sure. So this goes back to the fact that so if we've got 18, 20,000 clients, they're all very different. They would all go and hire very different people. And it's up to us as a business to go and recruit and attract different kinds of people to represent different businesses. And all those people then need to be led and interacted with and motivated in lots and lots of different ways. I mentioned before about the pick and mix and the kind of things that we do for our people. And for us, it's that staff engagement is just absolutely critical so that their own personalities can come through and we're looking after them in the right way. One thing that we really use here is workplace. So Facebook's intranet has been just super critical in terms of giving everybody that feedback channel, so they've got the ability to say how they feel, to interact with their teams, and just to have these honest conversations, both with me as a business leader and with their own teams and with each other. And so I think that's just been a really good tool that we've been able to use really successfully lately.
It allows you to be accessible to them, isn't it? I mean, there's not many companies where you get to speak direct to the CEO.
No, I do videos as well, so and it's quite nice. It's not about making sure that everything looks perfect. It's thinking, right, let's just do this little bit to camera. I've got something to tell the team, and that's going down really well. For me, I've always talked about authentic leadership and about being one version of yourself, and there's no room for ego really in business, no room to go and dress things up. It's okay to say that you don't know and you engage your wider team and let's see what feedback you get from them. And I think at no other time has this been more important, is to be able to just be one version of yourself, whether it's you're communicating with people or whether it's that you're asking for feedback and how actually people feel. You've got to be approachable.
Excellent. I've got to say, I've really enjoyed the one thing to come out of all these Zooms and stuff and Teams meetings that we have is the level of authenticity, and you're really getting to know about the people that you're working with, you're dealing with. It's actually humanized everybody. So I quite enjoy the little dog and cat interruptions and stuff, and when the kids come flying in the room and you see someone frantically trying to get them out of the way, it's like, just bring them in. Let them be curious about what you're doing, because that actually might be some of the things that sow the seed for people coming into our industry. Mommy, daddy, what are you actually doing? What do you do in your job? Because they can actually see and hear more about what you're doing, and hopefully that will invoke a discussion about what you do in your career, because if we're invisible to the people in the workplace, in the buildings that we work in, we're probably invisible to the kids about what we do. And how are we going to feed that next generation of people coming in if they don't actually know and see what we do? So hopefully this will give them a little bit of a portal to see what we do within the FM sector. So CJ, what would you say are the best examples of wellbeing practice that you've seen across the different organisations that you've worked with, and what's made those stand out for you?
I think it's, as I kind of covered off previously, it very much is about the people who give choice and are able to individualize the way that they go about things. You know, workplaces are going to become the places where people make an active choice about connecting with other people, because actually if you can sit in a very individual way and do your work in front of a laptop, you'll probably choose more so in the future to do that at home. So we need to think about our workplaces in terms of how do we give people safe choices about the decisions they've made to go in and connect with other people. But, you know, to talk about our point from earlier, it is now more than ever, people's connection with purpose is really strong. And I think we've seen some fantastic examples of companies that have done extraordinary things during the pandemic. I mean, Brewdog massively changed their business to hand sanitizer in what felt like overnight, and did some really meaningful leadership stuff around cutting salaries. And they, you know, they're people Brewdog, I think, are a business that you can look to and kind of really appreciate the way that they reacted. And we've seen some really terrible examples of really poor leadership, and kind of people not thinking about the future and their people in the right way. So I think we as businesses and organizations and people, we need to talk about the good stuff more, because you notice as soon as you start to hear the good stories, then other businesses copy them, and people like hearing good news and good stories, and then they can take that on for themselves. So I think one of the things we need to do as organisations is really shout about the good stuff, so people have some best practice to talk about.
Excellent. So we've got a question from the audience now. How important is it to encourage team members to keep in touch with colleagues in other teams that they normally have done so in the workplace? And how is this best done? Is it sufficient to leave it to their individual discretion? Who would like to take that?
Well, I can take it from the research side and give an example, and I think there'll be other ones as well. So we reviewed the literature on teamwork, and we know it matters, and that it can improve performance, and it doesn't need to be a special social thing. One of the things that we've done is we've got projects across teams, so that we've got somebody from each bit of the business working on a thing together. Sometimes that is an operational thing, or it's a new opportunity that's occurred, but those little mini teams are really quite fun ways to do this. So you're actually just doing something together, so you have a reason to participate and work together.
Yeah, I'd totally agree with that. One of the biggest complaints we hear is about siloed working, people defending their own turfs, and which is actually very counterproductive. And so having those cross-functional projects, cross-functional teams, and encouraging working in that respect really, you know, helps with the relatedness quite apart from anything else.
I think, Nikki, just to add into this, I think there's been loads and loads of conversation about new normal. It's kind of like the new buzzword, drives me mad now. But one of the things that businesses, organizations, teams, leaders need to think about is we've got all the resources that we need for our future, for our organization's future. It's about how do we take those resources and connect them in different ways. I think what we've got to be quite careful of as we kind of emerge out of this is not kind of slipping into old habits because it's comfortable. We kind of need to look at everything we have and connect things in a different and new way, but we've got it all already.
Yeah, excellent. So thank you, Dinesh, for that question. Apologies, I've been trying to get the questions widened out there on the screen so I could see who was answering them. So what would you say are the top tips for keeping company culture alive? And that's from Peter Watts.
Shall I pick this one off? For me, it's just because you're all working remotely at the moment, don't change your behaviour. So if big part of your culture is that you wander around and have a chat with people, you need to find a way to virtually wander around and have a chat with people. And that's about being able to bump into people. Yes, it takes more to go and do that. So you need to think, right, okay, I'm going to phone 10 people every day from the team, or you go into Microsoft Teams or whatever. Give them a poke, ask them how they are. I send them a message, maybe using Workplace. And so it's as much as possible, you've got to go and replicate your behaviour that you would have if everybody's all in one place. Takes longer, but go and do that remotely as well.
Excellent. I know that's really helped. My friend's just taken a role as a deputy head teacher in a primary school, and it's been increasingly difficult for those guys. And one of the things, she was like, kind of lost, because I really want to prove myself and what value I could add to the organisation. And that she said, but it's really difficult because I feel like I'm in a synthetic environment. And one of the things that I suggested to her, I was like, well, have you thought about actually calling the parents? Because you know, when you see on Facebook people's things pop up, it's like they're struggling with the kids, they're struggling with some of the homework, and they're probably not. People don't feel that they want to reach out and say, actually, I'm struggling with this. But if someone comes to you and say, hey, how you coping? What's working for you? What's not working for you? What else can we do? It's a lot easier to say, actually, this bit's all right, but I'm struggling a little bit with this. Have you got any more resources? Or what the hell are these maths questions? And it just makes it a lot easier for people then. So definitely, if someone comes in and asks a question, and I think, I don't know if anybody has ever seen Simone Fenton Jarvis speak before, and it's around training your staff how to ask the right questions of their colleagues, so they don't just say, I'm fine. That if something's bothering them, you're asking the question in the right way that they feel comfortable, and they can actually say, actually, I'm struggling with this. And has anybody else got anything to add on the 5 top tips? Tom? Anything to add at all?
Well, I think, again, as people transition back to the workplace, we know there'll still be a huge number of people at home. So your team meetings will be maybe a few of you in the office, where with lots of people at home, and basically it is still remote working. So and remote team leadership. So the lessons we've learned, even though you've got a core of people in work, will still be invaluable. And one of the big dangers is this inclusion, exclusion, in-group, out-group. And as we need to be really careful that we don't marginalize those who aren't physically with us in the room when we make decisions, because of the biggest sort of threat to the brain is social exclusion. So I think we need to sort of carry on the good practices that we've put into place already, and not let up just because a few of us are back at the office.
Excellent. I've got a question for Joanna. This is from Claire Hollister. Hi Claire, I hope you're well. I've not seen you for a little while. Look forward to catching up for you with the cuppa when things get normal, if they ever are going to be normal. And the question for Joanna is, are you planning on bringing people back into your office to work, or are you actually planning on maintaining a larger home working contingent?
So hello Claire. So the answer to that is yes to both of them. There are people who we're going to have to bring back pretty quickly because their tech won't work at home. So we've got about 25, 28 people who just cannot work right now because their Wi-Fi speeds aren't good enough, or they're not in the right kind of living accommodation. So we do want to go and get those people back very safely as quick as possible. But it's really made us go and examine very closely what our business model is and how we deliver a mix of work and home in the future, particularly with live chat, we think. So yeah, as the management team, we've got some work to do there, but there's no doubt about it. This will have changed the way we deliver our service for the future.
Excellent. I think from my perspective, I'm really, really hopeful that some of the barriers that we sometimes see towards people getting a broader spread gender-wise for recruiting, and also for accessibility if people have disabilities and stuff like that. I'm really hoping that this pandemic, if anything, my hope for the future is that it has proved that we can operate from home. And I'm hoping it will break down some of the barriers with some of the companies where there's more of a presenteeism culture, that they feel that people have to be in their office to be able to take up a role. And especially when you come into recruiting for roles that are really rare, like your CAFA managers, your estimators, that's difficult to find, and depending on where your office is, you can really struggle to recruit for those roles. So I'm hoping that it will open the eyes of some of the employers where they're fixated with people being sat in a desk in their office, that actually opens up the talent pool, so that it gives more people opportunity. It gives employers a better choice of the people that they're able to employ. Nancy?
Yeah, I think this is a really great point. So we know from the literature that companies that offer flexible working have happier employees, but the people who take up those flexible working policies are less happy than the rest of the staff. So there's something funny going on. And we also do know from women's experience in the workplace that being less visible is one of the reasons for fewer promotions. So I think everyone having experienced remote working will help us understand those visibility issues and inclusion issues. I think it's probably worth saying that something to pick up here, that there's an upside for many, many people about the commute. So we know that the longer your commute is, the harder it is. And we know that most things we get used to, but regular annoyances we don't. And a commute is one of those things that if it's bad, it annoys us every day. And we never get used to it. And so things like leisure time satisfaction and satisfaction with your health can increase greatly, particularly for women if it's an active commute, so you get your physical activity on the same time as getting somewhere. So I think there's some real benefits that can happen by understanding those effects on time use for commute and leisure and health. But the last thing to say is that it's around facilities management in particular, and tech that you mentioned, Joanna. So if your tech is annoying regularly, it will be miserable regularly. And so how you spend your time matters. So we can reduce misery by improving the experience of doing admin, whether it's life admin or work admin. So those are the sorts of things you can make a big difference to people's lives. So I think that your tech issue and prioritizing that is really, really important.
That's something that I've seen my husband's company works for. He works for Skanska facilities, and they've been absolutely on it from the start with their tech capability, with their health and safety, the DSC stuff, making sure that if they need chairs sent out, if they need screens sent out, that all their staff are super, super safe when they're working. So little nod to Skanska there for a job well done, and that credit where it's due. And one of the, we've just had a really interesting question coming from Sarah Jowett. I hope that's that correctly, and it said, would it be sensible to design a survey for staff to understand if managers are coping? So there's still poor managers around who cannot cope with remote management, and if we understand who is struggling on this aspect, then training and mentoring can be targeted. I mean, to be honest, there's some managers that struggle with management when we're in a forward-facing environment. So I would say from both aspects, that's a really, really valid point. Does anybody does anybody do this? So CJ, how would you approach this one, CJ?
I think surveys is one of my kind of regular rants, so apologies, but
I thought that'd be a nice one to tee up for you.
I think it's dangerous sometimes to think that a survey that just gathers lots of information is kind of the answer. You know, sometimes it's the simple stuff that makes the biggest difference. So don't mobilize a huge survey to try and find out stuff. Go and talk to your people. People will connect when they know that they're cared about. So have a conversation. I never feel like someone really values my opinion if I'm filling a survey in. I'd rather they ask me. So I think keep it simple.
Yeah, I think also you've got to put the context to it. When somebody fills in a survey and they answer a question and they've got a simple A, B or C, that could be something that then ends up with that manager being discriminated against because they've not got the space to answer the question with the context that it needs, and it could be taken however the person reading the answers is thinking. Nancy?
So I kind of agree, there's no substitute for good communication. If you do want a survey with short set of questions about the things that matter, we do have one based on the Work and Health Unit, the DWP, Thriving at Work standards. So it's aligned, it picks up those 5 areas I mentioned. But if I was going to pick one thing that would make the biggest difference to wellbeing at work, it would be management training and doing that as well as possible. And I think I'd say that in any situation whatsoever. So if we can use this time for online learning, for management training, let's do it. It works.
Absolutely. There's lots of free resources out there at the moment on the Open University. Also, there's various different training providers that are offering free training at the moment. So, I mean, if you can communicate that to your staff and get them to look on the resources there and see if they can upskill in this time. Tom, did you have something to add there? Sorry. Or were you just moving your hand?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an extremely important point, Nancy. We spoke about how important it is to have objectives, projects, and a lot of people are upskilling themselves during this time, you know, whether they've been furloughed or even if they're sort of working, but the work is slightly different. It's an ideal opportunity to train yourself in management, take on some management training, and even I've taken up tennis training, so you know, and bass guitar training as well, so don't limit it to workplace training. It is really important to have a focus, have a goal, have something that really excites you, again, to make sure we stay as much as possible in this central executive network. And of course, a lot of research has shown that remote training is actually more effective than face-to-face training. Even though people tend to prefer face-to-face training, the results are more impactful because generally, if you've got remote training, it's delivered spaced out. You can't do sort of 3 days in one chunk. So because you're spacing it out, when we sleep, we integrate that knowledge from one day, take it on, then have another chunk of training. It allows us to sort of practice and implement and look for those brain networks to integrate the new knowledge with what we're already doing. So
do you think that's a mindset thing then, Tom? That we perhaps, if it's shown that the studies show that the remote training works better because it's allowing us to download the information, so to speak, do you think that's because we think we are better in face-to-face training because we perhaps crave the connection between the peer-to-peer learning?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So we do crave connection, and that is one element that isn't necessarily as well catered for with virtual learning. But again, the way we handle that is set people up in buddy groups. So they have groups of 4 people. They do an assignment for one module, bring it back to the next module. So and again, that works extremely effectively because people don't have to make that effort to meet up. People are at home, so they haven't got, you know, people are generally a lot more available to train in groups. And so we've been very effective.
Good stuff. I've got another question here from the attendees. Are any of you sending your staff any gifts to say thank you and keep at it? You're doing good in difficult circumstances. I'm struggling to decide if it's a good idea, especially when we've all had a 20% pay cut. So this is an interesting one. Joanna, you guys are like goodies galore usually, aren't you? I'm a proud owner of some Moneypenny socks and books and all sorts of bits and pieces. I know that you guys are usually really active in this space and you do birthday cakes and all sorts, don't you? Would you like to take this one?
we do. Well, let me tell you first of all what we've done. We had an acquisition in Atlanta in February, and what we've done out there, we've got about 200 people, and they've actually sent out Chick-fil-A little vouchers to everybody, and they went down really well. So a lovely little thank you card. Yes, I've got plans in the UK now. We did have a few people furloughed out of the business. Now they're all coming back. So I have some plans. Watch this space. And when we do something, we always do it well. So yeah, and clearly we did have some party plans and everything over the summer. We're actually 20 years this year, but we've had to change all that. So a bit of a different thank you focus now than we would have done.
Well, happy birthday and happy anniversary. It's been a great feat. CJ.
Yeah, it was just to say, if you're concerned about how people might react to something like that, when you've got kind of furlough situations or you're making cuts and redundancies, I think ask a few people what they think. You know, the fact that you are taking the time to find out how people might feel about it will speak volumes about how much you care and really want to say thank you the right way. So don't ever worry about authentically saying, and I know Joanna will completely agree with this, I don't know if this is the right thing. What do you think? Because I'd really like to say thank you. That speaks volumes. So go for it.
I think that's probably one of the most powerful things that we hear in feedback from our candidates, that the bosses that just say thank you for the effort that they go to. It doesn't, I think companies are under the impression that people leave for more money, and that very often it's because they're just not recognised, and that doesn't need to be a pay rise. It doesn't need to be a bonus. Sometimes it's your boss just, even if they can't get to you, sending you an email to say that was a great piece of work you've done, or passing by your desk and saying, let's go for a coffee, I want to say thank you for the work. It's yeah, it's a really, really big thing that is missed. People always think they need to have budget to do this well, and it's the simplest things that make the most impact. So we've got another question.
So that again. No, I was just going to say, from a neuroscience perspective, that's absolutely correct. When you're thanked, that increases your status, which is a reward, which triggers dopamine, which makes you feel good. And it is not done as much as it could, because we're all out there scanning for threats all the time, looking for people to do things wrong, looking for what's wrong, because, you know, evolving on the savannah plains, that's what would keep you alive. And so that is why the sort of looking for the negative is more prevalent. And so managers need to absolutely over-egg the positive. And John Gottman says a healthy marriage has a positive to negative ratio of 5-to-1 interactions. So, you know, and actually it needs to be considerably more than that. So if that's true for marriage, imagine how much more important it is in the workplace, or equally important.
Yeah, excellent. So I've got a couple of questions on here. So this one's from our very own Peter Brogan. Controversial one: is the workplace alive or dead going forward? Why have a workplace when tech has highlighted many functions can work from home? Who fancies this one? CJ?
So I think it will just be different. I don't think workplace won't be dead. It will just be really different. And I think we've chatted about, actually, they'll become places where the community of work can happen, and people can be intentional about spending time with somebody else or with people. So I don't think it's an alive or dead thing. I think it's an evolved thing. This is just, you know, people talk about the big pause, but actually in reality, it's a giant leap that we've all just taken. And lots of companies who never thought working this way could work for them have realized that it's possible. So I think it's not dead, it's different. We've just taken a giant leap forward.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. That actually leads in nicely to a comment that we have from Sally. She said that she agreed about the connection with the colleagues, and that I'll randomly take a colleague, call a colleague just for a chat, takes a minute or two to realise that I'm not actually calling them to discuss work, but just have a chat, and it's a great way to keep a connection. And she's also sent a thank you out to the panelists for great content on the webinar. So final question here before we quickly wrap up, because I can see that we're coming towards the end now. This is from Karen Clark, and she says that her biggest fear is that when she hears, if we ever become normal, how can we deal with that? Any of our panelists?
Does it mean that when we get normal, as in it gets back to normal and it all changes? I've heard, so some of the people I've spoken to is like, why would I want to go back to what it was? Is that the question?
Yeah, I think that's the question. She says the biggest fear is when she hears, if we ever go back to normal, if we ever become normal, how do we deal with that? I'm a firm believer that this was all sent for a reason, to help us evolve into better things. So why would we want to go back to normal? Why do we not take everything on board and take us into a new way of working, a new way of interacting with each other, where we value each other more, we value ourselves more and our well-being, and that we actually we use it as a positive? Why return to normal?
I really like this question. So there's a couple of things. So one is that well-being is about focusing on what matters and what really is important, and it's helping us understand that. And we may want to make some quite big changes to the way we work and think, and hold on to the things that we missed and noticed. So it's quite, I think Tom was saying that how we need more the positive than the negative, because we just don't notice the positive as much, but noticing the things that we missed, the joy of that chat with a friend that we haven't seen for 10 weeks. Or that with a colleague, how do you have that networking chat? I literally just phoned up a colleague I would normally catch up with a coffee. But also recognizing that going back to normal will feel different. So when things are changing rapidly, you expect it to feel different, and therefore you sort of go with it a bit more. You expect everyone to feel slightly processing new things, but actually we need to be just as patient with each other as we go back into this newer normal for what it was. We're human doings as well as human beings, and when there's discomfort and uncertainty, we want to do. And I think your point, CJ, about how you can get control, agency in it for the individual's experience is really important. So the amount of control and discretion we have at work has dropped by about 30% in 40 years. And if we can give that back through tailoring things through wellbeing, that would make a big difference. We're all human.
Excellent. So we have one final question, but as we're coming towards the end of the webinar, I'm aware that some people might have to get back to work. What I'd really like to do, if the panelists are quite happy to do this, is if you'll be happy to perhaps answer this on the LinkedIn channels, because I know that a lot of the attendees might have some questions for you. I know that you've all got really interesting stuff that you can share that people can access as well, and it might be good to get that onto the LinkedIn channels. So a parting question for you guys to have a think about is, can the panelists offer one takeaway for FM managers in terms of what opportunities we can clinch to raise the profile of the FM profession? So I'll keep that question here. I'm going to mail this out to you guys after, if that's okay. Do you guys have any objections to, actually I'm putting you on the spot here, to answering these on LinkedIn so that people can access yourselves? We're talking about accessibility. I'm going to throw you right out there into the realm now, apologies, so that people can actually ask questions and they can benefit from that knowledge, because that's actually a really, really good question that will help people moving forward. Is that okay?
Great.
Perfect. So I'll probably get lynched after this. So excellent. So that's going to take us on to the survey. So we've got the impact and experience survey, which is online, which you can access on the IWFM website. That's going to give you some more detail around what's happening. Also, one of the things I want to give a really big plug to, and it's something that's really important to us as chairs of the committees. IWFM each year does a members survey, and I recognise that you guys out there in the field are super busy, and that sometimes you don't get back home till late, and the last thing you want to do is fill in another blinking survey. However, the member survey is what helps you at the Institute shape the strategy and the way forward for the organisation, and it is super important. But so few people actually take the time to fill that out. So I would really like to see you, and especially the people that are the lead nominees on their memberships that actually have their teams on their membership as well. Please can you get your teams to fill that out? We really want to be shaping the organisation the way that you want to see and the things that you want to see from your membership. So please encourage your employees to fill that out for us. I'd like to say a massive thank you to our panellists today. We've got some more good information. If you go to the Insight Hub, that's where you can see our good practice guides. There's research reports on there, or the guidance reports on there, the content hubs. And lots of you may have been members for a very long time and never actually gone and had a look at this information. It's stuff that you could perhaps use and extract some information out of good practice guides. They've got the COVID-19 resource lab on there. That's got loads of resources on there that you can share with your staff and help them guide them as they're going back to work. But again, a massive thank you. If you would like to ask a question or share any case studies and best practice with us, please do us an email at policy@iwfm.org.uk. We really want to hear what you guys are doing out there. Let's celebrate the success. This leads on nicely to Dinesh's question, where you can tell the whole industry what you're doing to celebrate success. See if you can replicate similar things in your workplace and actually use this to raise the profile of the FM professions. Tell your friends, tell your colleagues, tell your children, and let's use that to follow the seed in. So I'm going to leave at that point and say thank you to our panelists, Nancy, CJ, Tom and Joanna. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks to all our attendees, and thanks to IWFM for actually putting this together for us. You can find the link to the recording on the IWFM website, and you can catch any of us on the LinkedIn channels, and I'll put a poster. Thanks very much, guys. Stay safe out there. Take care. Bye.